So now this is working, we know that we have a list of we actually have a list of users inside of our table. Okay, so inside ext.js, we're now going to look at this set interval, and we're going to look at getting the list of users. So this time we're going to perform something slightly different, and we're going to use 3 different variables in post, parameters in post. Remember, this was the first parameter, this was the second, but this time we're going to provide an additional callback function. And this is because users.php is going to relay to us a list of users. So let's go ahead and do that now. Right, so inside of here we want to again send a post request to users.php. So that's php/users.php. The variables that we're sending, we're only going to send one, because obviously we don't need to supply a username here. We just need to supply an action, which is list. And then the third function is a callback function with a parameter data, or a returned value data. And data is going to hold anything that's returned or echoed out by users.php. And essentially what we're going to do now is, because we've provided the action list, we inside users.php we can just echo out the list of users, and this will be placed into this data variable. So where does the data variable go? Well, obviously we want to display the list of users inside of users online div. So we want to go ahead and select users underscore online, and we want to place some HTML in there, which is data. So we use the HTML function here, and we place the data variable inside of users online. So now that we've outlined what this is actually doing every half a second, we want to go ahead and actually allow for this list to do something. So down here what we want to do is append onto this if statement, and we want an else if here, and we want to say else if action is equal to list, and if action is equal to list, we call user list function. So the obviously when the list action is found, we want to call user list function. Now we have one problem here, we're not actually sending the username with this, so we need to modify this line here to allow only for the action to be supplied on its own. So we say if is set the username and the action together, or using the or operator, is set and $_post action. So if the action's set, then we can continue with this code. We have action here. Obviously we don't need the username in this case, so perhaps my code's a tiny bit illogical in the sense that we assign this variable, but you can go ahead and modify that in your own time to make it more efficient. So action here, if it equals list, we want to call user list function. So the users list function, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to be returning the results in an array and then echoing out this array down here. So I want to create an array called users or user list equals array. And I want to go ahead and create a query and store that in users or users query. So this is MySQL query, an extremely simple query. Select user underscore name from users. So what this will do is it will select all fields that are user name from the table users. Remember, we have our field name here and our table here. So now we can go ahead and actually run a loop to loop through every name in this list. So while users row is equal to MySQL fetch a sock, which fetches an associative array from users query, we can go ahead and actually output something here. So I'm going to, or not output something, but we want to store each value in a element of users list array. So users list, and then remember our square brackets because we're just adding to this array. Users list is equal to users row user underscore name. So let me just go ahead and explain this just again for anyone that didn't understand. We've queried the database, we've looped through the results, and we've applied each, or we're appending elements onto this users list, or user list array up here that we defined earlier, and that is taken from the users row, which remember is here, and that's username, which is the field name. So now what we can just do is return user list. So now user list function returns an array. So user list is now an array. So inside of here, what we can do is we can use a for each loop, and we can say for each users list. I think we called it users list, didn't we? Or user list. For each user list as user. Now what's going to happen is, because we placed username inside each element of this users list array, user is now a single name. So if we had three names in the list or in the database table, this would loop 3 times, as would this loop 3 times as well. So what we can now do is echo, let's say user, and then we can append a break onto that. So now what this will do is the file users.php will essentially pick up on this action. It will go ahead and loop for every users list as user. Remember, we returned each name as an array, and then it will just echo out each element of that array. So fairly simple. Let's go back to our page. We'll have to go ahead and delete this and then refresh. So I'm going to type in Alex, press enter, and nothing has happened. So let's take a look at why that might be. Okay, so we might have to go ahead and duplicate this tab over and type in Alex and browse. Oh, and nothing's happened. Okay, so let's take a look at why this might be. Let's go over to ext.js, action list. So if action equals list, that looks okay. Users.php, data, users online. Well, actually it appeared that we didn't have any results go into the database, so let's just take a look at our right. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So username action joined. Maybe we could just copy this and let's take a look. So Alex, okay, and that should have passed that name to the database, which it hasn't done. So there might be an error in my PHP file. Let me just take a look and see if I've written anything wrong. So we've got the query here, users query. There we are. I didn't put a semicolon on